Welcome back. You're watching The Globe on SABC News. Now we continue with our coverage of the DRC, and for more on the DRC, we are joined via Skype by KAMBALE MUSAVULI, a social entrepreneur and an international human rights advocate working with Friends of the Congo, an advocacy group. KAMBALE, thank you so much for joining us on The Globe. Now, how complex is the counting process in the DRC?
It is not as complex as any elections around the world. The delay of the counting process is really an attempt to prevent the population from rising up. We have every indication now that the result that will be published will not reflect what the Congolese people are calling for. So the more delay that takes place, the easier it gets to bring down the tension that is existing in the country. And why am I saying this statement so strongly? This is not the first time we've had this issue. In 2006 and 2011, actually much more in 2011, we saw the same tactics. We saw how delay were made. Communications in 2011 was that we do not clearly know who are the winners of the elections, and they're using the same tactic now. It's quite unfortunate also to see the regional leaders, specifically the South African government and SADC, siding with the current regime in their attempt of rigging the election at this time.
Now, let's speak about the issue of the different camps claiming to have won the election. Shadare's camp on the one hand and Martin Fayulu's camp on the other hand, and then coming in as a third party is the Catholic Church, where they state that they know who's won the elections. Does this not cause continued tension within a country that has seen, as you mentioned, 2006 delayed results, 2011 was a worst case scenario, and now the three parties that are claiming that they know who's won? Does this not cause more friction for the people of the DRC?
I don't believe so. I mean, the Catholic Church, they are not the only observers inside of the country, and they're not the only one who have made such statements. If they had released the result, that could be something different. But it doesn't take a rocket scientist to know where the will of the Congolese people is. For anyone who is in DRC right now, they are clear that the Congolese population is ready for a new leadership in the Congo. So we know that also by just seeing the campaign, the electoral season during the campaign time, when the opposition leaders and the majority people who are around Kabila were campaigning, you will see thousands of people around it. I believe, I mean, I cannot speak on behalf of the Catholic Church, but I believe that the reason why they made such statement is the experience from 2011. In 2011, they knew the results of the elections. They did not press as much right now. The only call from the Catholic Church is that they want to make sure that the so-called Independent Electoral Commission release the results that they are seeing from the 40,000 observers they have. If it's causing tension, it's what can cause the speculation that clearly the Congolese government has something to hide, that a statement that does not have results published will cause tension from the Congolese government. Why can't they just release it after they say that they could release it after 48 hours of the elections?
Now, let's speak about the role that you mentioned, SADC, you mentioned the AU, and now the role of the UN. Can these groupings or organizations play a role in allaying fears of possible outbreak of violence in the country?
Indeed, and I'm quite disappointed by regional leaders on the African continent, particularly the AU, SADC, and South African government. The Congo has known conflict for not over 2 decades. Millions of people have died, and the Congolese have used any potential possible means of non-violent means to transform their country. This is a unique opportunity in the heart of Africa, whereby the Congolese people, for a long time now, or some argue the first time, will be able to elect a leader in the country that will transform the country from the violence that he has known to a new beginning, and which will help the African continent. So you're finding yourself in a situation where the SADC and South African governments are siding with the Kabila regime. Their rhetoric is in line with the regime. I'll give you an example. Everyone who has been following the elections know that the election is not free and fair. A lot of electoral kits did not get to the polls. People were turned away from voting stations, polling stations. You had 1.2 million voters removed from the roll due to the so-called Ebola, yet the people organized the election in those areas by themselves, and so on, right? But the SADC and the AU are coming out and saying that the elections took place with very well with what the Congolese government has done. And so Congolese are asking themselves, what is at stake in the Congo for South Africa not to side with the Congolese people? On the other side, which is very surprising, you're finding yourself with a country such as the United States, which has strategic interest in the Congo, specifically cobalt, siding with the Congolese people. They're making statements where they are calling for results to be published. They're putting pressure on the Congolese government. The Africans are supposed to be the one at the forefront of this issue, not the United States, not the European Union. That it should be logical for any African to look at the situation in the Congo and say, we are going to side with the Congolese people and make sure there is free and fair election, that the leader that they are choosing is coming. And that's why this is actually an appeal, not just to the South African government. It's more so for the South African people. The African continent sided with South Africans during apartheid, demanding that there are human dignity displayed in Africa and that the apartheid system ends. This is an opportunity for the South African people to put pressure on the government, for that government not to side with a tyrannical regime of Kabila, to allow him to extend his power beyond by his chosen candidate, and allow the Congolese people finally, after the assassination of Patrice Lumumba in 1961, to finally choose a leader that who comes from the Congolese people.
Kambale, very quickly, did the authorities, the CENI in particular, not foresee such logistical problems or logistical mess that they speak of, that they're dealing with in terms of the counting of the votes?
Indeed. I mean, and this is why I say very forcefully that the current electoral process in Congo is really an attempt to rig the elections. They actually had 7 years to organize the elections. The reason I'm saying that is that after the end of the 2011 elections, you have time to organize. But the Kabila regime did not have the intention of organizing the elections. They've delayed the election over 2 years and is still in power, changing judges and so on. But why are we having elections today? That's the larger story. The only reason we are having elections today is because the Congolese people, with their feet and the numbers in the street, have forced the Congolese government to organize election, and they paid a huge price. Many Congolese people in the past 2 years have been killed in protest, have been imprisoned, and many have been pushed to exile. So the larger story is, because of the will of the Congolese people, the Congolese government had to organize elections. Unfortunately, they are trying to tamper with that process to continue to rule. But I don't think that will be successful. And as you see, the cutting off internet inside of the country to not allow information to get out, but Congolese are finding ways to still get information out of the country. So the battle is not over. And in the final analysis, the Congolese people will prevail from this situation.
Kambale, thank you so much for joining us. We'll leave it there for now. That is Kambale Musavuli, a social entrepreneur and an international human rights advocate working with Friends of the Congo, an advocacy group.